Welcome to My Therapist is Out. Each episode, we talk with a therapist from Open Space Therapy Collective or LGBT community members about mental health and building community. This week, your host is OSTC therapist Terra Friedman. Terra is an associate therapist and specializes in working with high-achieving women who experience anxiety. Terra also works with couples and partners who are currently in or exploring non-monogamous relationships.
As we dive into today's topic, please keep in mind that this is a mental health podcast. We will talk about sensitive and difficult issues that are not appropriate for all audiences. Please take care while listening.
All right, welcome back to the My Therapist is Out podcast. We are going to be jumping into our new mini-series. So our new mini-series is called Queer Hearts, Healthy Starts. It's about breaking toxic relationship patterns. So if you have ever been asking yourself, can I have a healthy relationship even if all I ever saw is toxic ones? This is the series for you. My name is Terra, she, her, and I'm an associate marriage and family therapist at Open Space Therapy Collective. We are diving into this topic now because we have more visibility as a community. We have more language for trauma and attachment and boundaries and all of these things. And yet a lot of queer folks are still living with these internalizations of toxic dynamics while trying to form new, safe, loving, steady bonds. We hear sentiments like, I don't know what healthy love looks like. I feel like calm relationships are boring. I'm afraid to recreate what I've seen in my past. So the reason as well that we're focusing on this is that connection is so important for our community. We're not just talking about romantic connection. We're talking about friendship, community connection. And our community is currently under immense pressure, is threatened and marginalized. And we need to be able to connect securely to nourish ourselves, other queer people, and the community as a whole. So this series was also inspired by episode 46 of our podcast with Kristen and Renee about having a healthy relationship if you only saw toxic ones modeled in your family. So if you are just jumping in, check that one out and come back and listen to Queer Hearts, Healthy Starts. So I'm going to define some of the language that we're going to be using throughout this mini-series. We're talking about, in the simplest terms, this question and answering it. If your template for relationships was toxic, chaotic, abusive, manipulative, is it possible to have strong, safe, and loving bonds? The upcoming series is going to be diving into this way more deeply. I'm going to be giving a real brief overview of some of the things you might encounter in that series. So the first thing that's jumping out, right, is this term toxic. What is toxic relationship? We hear that kind of across social media, and it's really casually used these days. So when we talk about toxic relationships, we mean ones based in power and control. We mean ones that have a lot of emotional reactivity, manipulation, codependence, gaslighting, things like that. So when we say emotional safety and we talk about healthy queer relationships, we're talking about ones rooted in that emotional safety, rooted in mutual respect, accountability and repair, consent, all of these things alongside a connection. What I want to be super clear about is that healthy does not mean conflict-free. It does not mean perfectly calm all the time. That's just not human. So there's also some myths that this series is going to dive into. And the first one is that queer relationships are automatically more evolved. Queer relationships are just kind of inherently healthy by the mere fact of them being queer relationships. The second myth is kind of the flip side, that queer relationships are inherently really dramatic or unstable by the mere fact that they're queer relationships. Of course, both of these are just projections. Both of these are not true. Queer relationships are shaped by the same attachment patterns, trauma histories, systemic pressures as any other relationship, but with the additional layer of minority stress, which is the chronic stress experienced by individuals from stigmatized and marginalized groups due to systemic prejudice, discrimination, and social stigma. So let's go back in time a little bit and talk about sort of the historical context of this mini-series. So for much of modern psychology, queer love has been labeled pathological. And this is really visible in the fact that homosexuality was included in the DSM until 1973. Trans identities have been medicalized, scrutinized for decades and continue to be. And we can't talk about the question of queer relationships and why don't we have more models of healthy queer relationships without talking about the AIDS epidemic. So just to, again, super brief overview, an entire generation of potential elders, mentors, long-term couples who could have been some models, were lost. And many young queer people grew up not getting to see queer partnerships in the day-to-day or in their lives. And this absence makes a huge impact. One of the researchers who played a really important role in shifting some of the narrative and belief system around queer love was a 1950s researcher, Evelyn Hooker. So this researcher did work that demonstrated gay men are not inherently psychologically impaired. I know that sounds like a wild claim that due to someone's sexuality, they may be psychologically impaired. And that was the dominant narrative at the time. In the past, queer relationships have been criminalized, hidden, framed as tragic, and activist movements like the Gay Liberation Front have pushed back, insisting that queer love is not deviant, it is liberatory. And as we're talking about some of the history around queerness and LGBTQ history and the pathologizing of these identities, it's important to consider the systems that shaped these narratives. So, of course, psychology doesn't develop in a vacuum. It's shaped by white supremacy, cisnormativity, patriarchy, heteronormativity, and the cis hetero white model of a healthy relationship is defined by those identities and by those people. So that model is seen as white, hetero, monogamous, gender conforming, and gender binary conforming, nuclear family centered. So this really matters because when relationships must be hidden or face such threat that they are hidden for survival, there's secrecy, there's urgency, there can be scarcity, these patterns get embedded and they don't just disappear automatically as social acceptance increases. So there's work that has to go into that, and there's healing that has to go into that. We're still unwinding that legacy today, and that's part of what brings us to our mini-series today.
Hey, Renee popping in just for a minute to say thank you for listening. We really hope you are enjoying the conversation today. Any chance you have to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend makes a huge impact, and we greatly appreciate it. If you have extra bandwidth and want to support the show even further, you can go to mytherapistisout.com and click the donate button. Any donations from $5 a month to a one-time donation makes a huge difference for us. We're a little self-published podcast, so any extra dollar helps. Again, go to mytherapistisout.com and hit donate. Now back to the show.
Jumping off of that brief history, and that history focuses on negative impacts on the queer community and the things that the queer community is still grappling with and healing from. When a community experiences that level of mass trauma without any institutional protection, relationship patterns can shift. Just as those patterns get embedded, they can shift the way relationships in that community look and function and feel. So attachment can shift toward anxious under stress in that way. Could sound like I could lose you at any moment, or it could shift more avoidant, like I don't want to get too close. I don't want to get too attached because it's not safe. So in therapy rooms and community spaces, maybe in media even, we see sometimes partners panic as their partner needs space, or people who stay in relationships that aren't really working for them or that don't feel healthy because the relief at feeling accepted for themselves is so strong. We see maybe people who are so unfamiliar with a calm and stable relationship, that they're sabotaging those relationships because the calm feels unfamiliar, and subconsciously that can feel dangerous. Culturally, in this time of increased anti-LGBTQ plus legislation and rhetoric, it's not just this legacy that we're living with. It is a sense of threatened external safety. And that can also raise the intensity again in individual relationships. Partners might be more likely to cling and hold on really tight. They might be more likely to withdraw or project fear onto one another. So as this pressure builds up, we also know that a lot of queer adults are first-generation models as queer folks of what open queer partnership can look like in their family. And all of that pressure together, it's like almost like a pressure cooker. And then these survival strategies come out. This matters, big picture, a lot for LGBTQ plus mental health, because relationships are one of the cornerstones as social creatures of our well-being. Relational instability can directly impact the major, most common mental health challenges, things like anxiety, depression, substance use, self-worth, things like that. Because when somebody believes that there's not other options for people to date, or that nobody else will understand them or accept them, they might tolerate harm. They might be more likely to tolerate mistreatment in a relationship than if they had the sense that there's safety in openly pursuing connection with people in their community. Of course, also I want to add in here that intersectionality of different identities will deepen this, because we bring in things like race, class, immigration status, ability. All of these things have the power to create that kind of power differential in a relationship, and can magnify some of the pressure and intensity and survival strategy arising that we're talking about. I see this play out in the therapy room. I've worked with clients who feel that explosive fights mean passion. That's what they were modeled, and that's what shows them in their mind that other people care, is this kind of intense conflict. Other people who I've worked with feel bored in stable relationships, and they interpret that kind of bored sense, that sort of numbness, as lack of love, when it might more indicate a lack of chaos. I want to round out this intro by emphasizing that queer relationships, healthy queer relationships, aren't just a romantic goal, that it's a protective factor for queer mental health, queer community in general. And I want to leave you with the certainty that secure connection can be built, that nervous systems can learn safety, we can practice repair, and we can create healthy relationship models that younger queer people won't have to unlearn in the future. Up next, as we get deeper into this topic with upcoming episodes, my colleagues Allison and Ernesto are going to be diving into what that word that we started talking about up top actually means, toxic. What does that actually mean? It gets thrown around a lot. After that, you're going to get to hear from Kristen and Raven, who are going to talk about the significance of friendships and how to build healthy ones. I would love it if you would all submit your questions, stories, thoughts across social media. If you want to be notified about Kristen, Raven, Allison, and Ernesto's upcoming episodes, and you want to be notified about this series, Queer Hearts, Healthy Starts, go ahead and follow us. Share with a friend who you think might be interested in the topic, and tag us when you listen. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. As always, let's end with a queer moment of joy from the community.
Hi, I'm Fox. My pronouns are he, they, and I think that a really cool moment of queer joy for me this year has been queer friendship, and kind of moving out of the world of like queer romantic partnerships and into like groups of queer men who support each other and love each other.
Hi, my name is Bex, and a recent queer moment of joy was being enveloped in a cuddle pile and steamrolled by my friend on their birthday.
Thanks for joining us. If you're in California and looking for a therapist, visit our website at openspacetherapycollective.com and book a free intro call with one of our therapists. If you're enjoying My Therapist Is Out, please rate, review, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Do you know somebody who could use a little extra dose of queer community? Send them one of your favorite episodes of My Therapist Is Out and help our collective grow one listen at a time. My Therapist Is Out is an open space therapy collective podcast, and our podcast editing is done by Rachel Peltzer and Smash and Grab Studio. We'd love to hear from you about today's topic, so email us at info@openspacetherapycollective.com. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Open Space Therapy Collective. Thanks for listening.